to the Evolution of Conversation, episode 2. My name is Claire Ems, and I'm excited to be here with you talking about the future of schooling. So this is a very apt topic for me at the moment. I myself am a teacher, but I am leaving the school system in the next while, in the next 2 weeks, to homeschool my children. So I have been needing a space to share my reasons. And I felt like the podcast is a good start. Like it's a good space to share. And I feel like it's a space that a lot of people are needing. As I talk to a lot of people, I feel like schooling is a huge topic. So I think I need to preface this episode with a little bit of I guess I want to say trigger warning. And I know that's a word that's used a lot, but I think triggers stop me from sharing. If I'm scared I'm going to trigger people, I stop sharing. And I don't want to really be in that space for this podcast. So I guess I'm saying, like, here's the warning. You might not agree with what I say. What I say might also make you feel like you do agree, and that's hard. Like maybe me saying that I've taken my kids out of school and I tell you the reasons why might make you feel like, well, now my kids are in the school and what do I do about it? Maybe you can't homeschool. That's okay. Maybe you're a teacher in the system and you can't get out right now, and maybe you don't want to get out, but you still don't agree with it. Well, this is the conversation we're having, and I'm still going to dig into what can you do if you're still in the system or your children are still in the system and you're not necessarily happy with it, but at the moment there's not an alternative. So we're going to look at that as well. So hopefully that also eases people's minds if it's something that might be triggering. I know for me, I couldn't get my children out of the system and I was still in the system, but I was looking at unschooling posts online and I was feeling angry and upset at them, which wasn't fair, but it's human. Because how come you are saying this is the best way to do things, but I can't do it right now? So then don't say it. And I guess I'm feeling like that's who I'm going to be now. I'm speaking out and I'm speaking my truth to others so that you can speak it too, and you can sort of see where I'm coming from, and you can disagree or agree or feel your feelings and sit with them and be like, why does this upset me? So that's my hashtag trigger warning. Okay, so let's get into it. Why am I talking about schooling? I think it's such an important part of our lives as adults and as parents and as teachers. Schooling is something that we are told is important from a young age. We're forced to go to school, many of us. Many of us didn't question it. We didn't feel that we needed to. But I guess I want to, and I always have questioned. So as a child, I was a, I want to say like textbook good girl at school. So I did all the things. I didn't miss school a lot, unless I was sick. I was kind, I guess. I hope, I don't know. I was people pleasing, which now with hindsight, I can see wasn't always the best. And it makes me feel triggered when I see kids people pleasing in school, but we won't go there right now. But yeah, so basically I was the kid who didn't resist school. I wasn't saying I didn't want to be at school. I do remember sitting at the edge of the school gate. I think I've even said this in other videos and shares where I would sit and sort of wish I could be on the other side. Like I would watch people drive past in their car and think, how nice would it be to be in a car now instead of here? So, that I think a lot of us have felt that. Maybe you felt that, just that lack of freedom, I think, from being in a system that sort of tells you what to do all day and you're told where to be, how to dress, how to look. And it's part of our society. So a lot of us are in that system, whether we have kids or we're teaching or whatever it is. But I guess I've always wondered, what if it wasn't? So that's where I'm starting. Like, what is the purpose of school? Okay. So obviously the easy answer is the purpose of school is for children to learn. And it's a place where kids go and there's a structure there. So we know that they're going to reach certain expectations by the end of a month or in a year. And a phase, whatever phase they're in at school. And by the end of their school journey, they're going to be prepared for the workplace or for studying or for university. And I guess I want to then backtrack even further and say who decided that this was the best way to do it. So obviously, like if we think back, there were people who started spaces for kids to learn, maybe their own children or people in their community or children in the community. And they started these spaces so that kids could learn to read, because reading then became, something that everybody did in their work or whatever it was. As the workspace shifted, then the needs for children shifted, because children now needed to learn the things that we were doing in work, But now I'm coming in looking at it from, there's this sort of disconnect, because the way that the workplace is going is shifting away from the way that schooling is going. Not necessarily everywhere, obviously. There are still workspaces that do function in this way. And there's a lot of people who need schooling to do the university journey to get the job, because you need the qualification to get the job. And I get that. But I'm also questioning that, because how many jobs don't need university qualifications? How many jobs are evolving now that require children to know less and think more? So there's a lot of jobs that require less content and less memorizing, but require a lot of problem solving and a lot of understanding the new. So there's obviously that saying that says, like, we're preparing children for a world of work that doesn't yet exist. For jobs that don't yet exist. How can you prepare children for something that doesn't exist? So I think that's where my questioning is. And let me tell you what I think could be different. So from my own journey of teaching children and having my own children and being a child, learning is defined differently by different people. So I might be in a school situation where learning means ticking the boxes of things that have to be learned. Like by the end of a grade, you need to have learned a certain amount of things, and you need to have passed, get the mark that says you've passed. For many other people, learning may be being motivated to want to learn things purely for the reason of wanting to learn it. And then that's the space that I'm finding myself in, for me and for my kids. Do I want my children to have 12 years of being told what they should know and being told what skills they should be developing, when nobody's asking them, what do you want to know, and what guides you? Like what calls to you? Like what sort of things do you want to know about? And what I'm finding is, and this is, I almost want to say it's not a criticism on the school system. It's 100% a criticism on the school system. And not because they're doing it on purpose. That's another thing. Like, nobody is trying to make things difficult or I don't know the words to say. No one's trying to make it a system that's not working. They are trying so hard. And that's why it's so hard to even say this, because they're trying hard. And it's not the teachers who are coming up with the system, because teachers are handed down. There are things you have to do. There are things that need to be done. And I know that I see that now more than ever, now that I've been in the system. Regardless of what school you're at, there are expectations, and there are, what is the word? I've lost the word. There are requirements that have to be met. And I get that, because a lot of people have said to me, well, what are you going to do? Just have a whole bunch of children doing whatever they want. And part of me says yes. But we'll touch on that just now with unschooling and self-directed learning. But what I'm saying is, I'm not blaming the school system. I'm not blaming parents. Everybody's doing the best they can. Everybody's trying really hard. The governments are putting a lot of stuff in place to ensure that children learn, because they want children to have a foundation in order to be able to get a job one day. And that requires them to know things and have skills. Is school the best way to get it? I don't know. For some people, maybe it is. But are there alternatives? 100% yes. And that's the space that I want to talk about now, is the alternatives, so that we can explore. We can look at what is there and what's developing. Because I've called this the future of schooling, not just schooling in general. Like, what's the future of schooling? What does it hold? And part of me thought that there were possibly opportunities for schools to shift. And I still think that there are, and schools have shifted. Like, people get really mad, and I get quite triggered when people say schooling is exactly the same as it's always been. It's not. I mean, things have changed so drastically. But to me, there are fundamental things that have not, because the alternatives aren't yet there. So, like standardized testing. And although standardized testing has shifted, we've got the concession systems where children get concessions if they struggle with reading or with writing or whatever the situation is. There are supports in place. But my question is, should we be standardized testing? Should we be doing exams? Should we be testing children on a pre-designed curriculum that only covers what it covers? It's got boundaries. It's got limits. And can schooling be limitless? Does it have to be limited to the things that children are learning? What about all the things that fall outside of that? So let's talk about unschooling. Let's start with unschooling. So what is unschooling? Unschooling is something that I heard about years and years ago at a family function where somebody said, I asked, what school do you go to? And they said, we're unschooled. And like, my brain was also like, what the hell are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Like, what are you talking about? And they said, no, we don't need to be schooled. We learn what we want to learn. And like, my brain was like, no, that's dumb. That doesn't even make sense. What is that? But that was before I studied teaching and before I went into the system and before I saw it and before I explored other options. But so what unschooling is being allowed to decide what you want to do. So unschooling for a lot of people is being at home and being guided through opportunities of, no, being guided to just decide what you want to learn. And a lot of people get anxious, but what if they don't do all the things they're supposed to do? And I still want to come back to that question of who decided what children are supposed to know. Like, a lot of the stuff we learn, we don't retain. A lot of the stuff we are told we should know are things that now I can ask you, do you still know, like Pythagoras's theorem, or do you still, maybe you do, but then it's your level of interest. I was not interested in that. And I did well in my exams because I studied really hard and I wanted to do well. But is it something I needed to know? Maybe not. So unschooling is slowing it down and trying to figure out and discover what those things are that a child actually wants to know, and spending more time on those things rather than on the things we think we're supposed to know. And there's even a resistance in me when I say that, because it's like we've got this fear of what if they don't learn the things they're supposed to know. And I don't feel like that makes sense, because if we come back to looking at children when they naturally are in a space where there's opportunities to learn, they will learn because they want to, not because they have to. But we don't have that space. So we look at children in school and we say, if we don't teach them, they won't learn. But we don't have a space where they're not being taught to see what would happen if they're not taught. What would they learn then? And I guess that's what I would love to do an experiment on, taking two groups of children, one in schooling for 5 years or 10 years or whatever, and then a group of children out of schooling and being guided to what they want to learn. Okay, so that leads on then to self-directed learning. Obviously, I have not done these things necessarily. I feel like I unschool my kids at home, like after school, because at the moment they're still in school, and we will be unschooling once they're out of the school system. But I mean, and that's another thing. I mean, just because your kid's in school doesn't mean you can't unschool as well at the same time, which a lot of people might disagree with, but this is my thinking. Outside of school hours, children can pursue their passions and their interests, and we can encourage them to question the system that they're in, and that might trigger people too. But why not encourage them to question their life? It's their life. How much choice do they have? And who said that that has to be their reality? Yeah. So as I was saying, sorry, self-directed learning. I don't know self-directed learning because I haven't done it, but I have looked into it and researched it. And it literally came up when I was studying to be a teacher in the normal mainstream school system. We did a module that was like the future of education. I can't remember what it was called. And I remember reading this and being so excited because it was saying that there are schools in, it was like Finland or somewhere, outside of South Africa, where they were having these, I think it was called open schools, where children come and they are kind of guided to what they want to learn, and then they set up expectations for themselves rather than external expectations being put on them. They're asked, what do you want to achieve by the end of the week? What do you want to achieve by the end of the month? That's sort of the way I understood it. I might be wrong. And it was completely the child's journey to map out with guidance. You're not just like thrown into the deep blue sea and said, go learn. There's still an element of, I don't want to say teaching. There's an element of coaching, and sure, people can still teach. If a kid asks, I want to know about this, and a teacher knows that, then you teach them. But it's an opportunity for children to self-direct their learning. And there are more schools now than ever that are developing this way of thinking. So the other thing I was going to mention was, I've forgotten what I was going to mention on top of that. Oh, a lot of the future of learning seems like, I'm not there, so I can't tell you what it's going to be, but I'm excited for a future where children don't have to tick boxes based on what they've learned. It's not like you've finished your curriculum, you've learned all these required things, but rather, what have you learned about what you were interested in? So instead of taking a list, this is sort of the visual I see. Instead of ticking things off a list, you're creating a list. So at the end of a week, what did you learn? Not, did you learn what you were supposed to learn? What did you learn? And what do you still want to learn? And how much of that do you want to learn? And I feel like there's so many more areas outside of school where children can learn this. And like I said, even if they're in school, they still can. But I'm curious to see what happens to the kids who are now going to these schools or these spaces. They're not always called schools, these learning environments where they are being asked what they want to learn, and they're being given that freedom to choose. And I think that's a big shift that's happening in our world in general, is that we're realizing, with my background with conscious parenting um, and my mediumship and my spiritual work, I can feel there's this shift into, I want to say, like the divine feminine, and you can look that up if it's not something that you're familiar with, but sort of like the idea that things don't have to be fixed. It doesn't have to always have a rule. It doesn't always have to have an expectation. Sometimes it can come from within. Instead of saying, I want to be this one day when I am older, it's saying, what do I want to be now? And what is that guiding me to, without actually knowing what that is? Because I've told my girls, sure, they might know what they want to be now, but it can change. And you might be 10 things when you're old, or you might do. I don't like using the word be because I don't see myself as a teacher. I teach. It's a verb, but it's not a label. It's not a noun of who I am. I am not a teacher. I teach for now, and like in 2.5 weeks, I'm not going to be a teacher anymore. I'm not going to be teaching, the verb, but I'm going to be guiding and facilitating learning with my children. So that's just a shift that I'm sort of making for myself to figure out where I'm going, because I hope that I can lead and guide my children to where they're going. Okay, so I feel like I've said everything I wanted to say in the second episode of the future of schooling. If you feel like there's something that you want to add, if there's something you want to share, please pop a message in my Instagram, which is Claire_intuition, or my YouTube channel, Claire_intuition. And yeah, I hope to hear from you, and I hope you catch the next episode, which will be coming out soon. I hope you enjoyed this, and I really enjoyed sharing my insights and thoughts with you. Thanks, and have a good one. Bye.